Welcome back. Have you ever been struck by flying debris on the roadway? Well, you're not alone. AAA has released new statistics showing that in just the last 4 years, the number of average yearly crashes has actually doubled, with more than 200,000 vehicle collisions caused by debris, 39,000 people injured, and more than 500 people actually killed in accidents like this by debris that was not securely locked down or from parts coming off vehicles like mufflers and tires. It's an alarming statistic, worsened by the fact that New Yorkers and in particular Long Islanders are keeping their vehicles on the road much longer than we used to. Well, joining us now to talk about that is Robert Sinclair, AAA Northeast spokesman. Welcome to the show, Robert.
Thank you for having me.
It's truly a staggering problem. You know, I could talk about a couple incidents I went through, but I had no idea it was this endemic.
Well, you know, this study follows up on one that we did back in 2001, and then it was 25,000 crashes per year and 90 deaths. So this is a 4-year aggregate, but if you break it down year by year, you see that the numbers are up significantly. And I think part of it is the fact that we're driving a lot more. Gasoline is cheap. We're on par to break last year's record of 3 trillion miles driven.
Wow.
So yeah, 3 trillion. You know, 300.
That's the nation, not just New York.
That's the nation. Yeah, no, it's busy here. But also part of it, we think, is the fact that we're seeing much older vehicles on the road.
Yeah, let's talk about that. We have a graphic that we put together from information you gave us, showing how we're keeping our cars on the road much longer. Just look at that, pretty startling. In New York State, there are nearly 8.5 million passenger vehicles in use that are 10 years or older. 8.5 million. For New York City, the number is more than 1.8 million, and despite a much smaller population than the city, Long Islanders have even more vehicles that are older than 10 years on the road, more than 1,860,000, so topping the city there. And so that's a lot of old vehicles.
Yeah, it's about, I think, 36 to 39% of those figures for the state, New York City, and Long Island.
So 35 to 40% of all registered vehicles are now more than a decade older?
Yeah, or older. And we're thinking what's happening is that those vehicles with their different types of steel in the exhaust systems, the mufflers and what have you, those rust, the attaching hardware rusts, and those parts fall off the road. The wheels and tires, the tires may burst. People are not taking care of them, so they blow out. That can create a problem. Wheels can rust and fall off. We do.
I've seen entire wheels on the road.
Oh, sure.
And a whole muffler system 4 or 5 times.
And keep in mind that these crashes that we looked at do not include animal strikes, don't include fallen trees, don't include debris from previous crashes, and don't include the problems around construction sites. So if you add those, the numbers would be even higher.
So why are we keeping the vehicles on the road longer?
It costs more to buy a new vehicle. Yeah. I mean, we did set a record last year in new vehicle sales, but still, it's a lot of money to go out and buy a newer vehicle.
And they last longer.
They last longer. And vehicles are in better shape.
Economy, they are having to keep
people are holding on to them longer. Yeah.
Why do you think Long Island tops the city? I mean, we're like the haven for everybody who has to drive.
Well, yeah. I mean, mass transit, if you're going east or west in Long Island, you've got the Long Island Railroad. That's great. But if you're going in another direction or a shorter trip or something like that, and even the Nassau Intercounty Express bus system is cutting back routes all the time, so people have to drive on Long Island.
So it's an obvious hazard. When cars are not well maintained, things fall off.
Absolutely. And interestingly, it was 37% of the time when somebody encountered something in the road, they swerved and got into a fatal crash as a result. So the advice is kind of like the advice that we give to people that might be driving on a country road and encountering an animal.
Right.
You know, if you swerve to the left, you might hit an oncoming vehicle. Swerve to the right, you hit a tree. Hit it. You know, if you can slow down.
Through this personally, I was struck by a flying piece of firewood late at night one time. It came off somebody else's vehicle, smashed right into my windshield, completely shattered it, but didn't break because they have the double panes, thank God. But I couldn't see a thing, and I had to pull over. Fortunately, nobody was there. I couldn't really tell whether I was going to hit anybody. And then a second time, I drove over a box spring that fell off somebody's vehicle, and I had, like, coming around a curve, had like 1 second to decide, and drove over the box spring, just barely clearing it.
Yeah.
Now, if I had perhaps gone sideways on it or tried to avoid or go into the other lane, I would have smashed into this other car that was right behind me.
It can be much worse when you try to swerve to avoid it.
Well, that really shows it. So we're not doing a good job, though, of taking care of securing this stuff, are we?
No, well, yeah, that's part of it. It's part of it is the cars that are 10 years or older, and they're dropping parts onto the road, and also we're putting items on the car, appliances, furniture, like we showed in the tape there. You know, you go to a big box store, you get a piece of twine. to hold a piece of something onto the vehicle, something large,
Right.
you know, go back into the store and get some of those ratcheting straps so you can properly secure the load. And the third item that we see is a big problem: the trailers becoming detached from the vehicle that are towing them. And you get into a lot of trouble. Yeah.
So now, if you're following behind somebody with these kind of hazards, things sticking out left and right, sharp objects, things that are heavy, what are you supposed to do? I mean, I never know whether I should just drop back, because maybe I'm going to be in an accident in 10 seconds from now, because they cause a big, huge highway pileup, or pull past them. I never know which to do.
Well, if they're in front of you, and you mentioned 10 seconds, we recommend leaving a 12 to 15 second out.
So I was on to the right answer.
Yeah, so yeah, stay as far behind them as possible, and then leave yourself some maneuvering room.
Right.
You know, don't be right next to another vehicle, so that if you do have to swerve, and remember that can be a problem, but if you do have to swerve,
Look at that.
Look at
And
that.
That's probably not like that bed spring that I encountered got on the roadway.
Right.
People trying to do crazy things like this. I mean, it's clearly you couldn't go 5 feet with this.
And it's obvious that that load was not properly secured. And in New York State, you can get a fine, $100, $350, $750.
We are tough on this.
Yes.
Explain the penalties here.
The first offense, $100. Second offense, $350. The third and subsequent offenses, $750. And you can get up to 30 days in jail.
So you really could be thrown in jail.
You really can be thrown in jail for having an improperly secured load. Now, I've read legal cases, court cases, where it affected a construction vehicle. A flatbed trailer truck had a bunch of logs, giant logs on the back, and the load wasn't properly secured. It fell off and struck a pedestrian rather, in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. A long, drawn-out court case, and they wound up having to pay a lot. They didn't go to jail. But, you know, the person was seriously injured, and there was a lot of expense, a lot of court and what have you, if they had simply secured the load properly. And that's the key about all these crashes. All these things are preventable.
They're totally avoidable.
Totally.
You're talking about 500 people getting killed in what really are senseless accidents from people just not being careful.
Right.
And then generally what, you're going to be, I mean, when people get killed like this, I imagine there must be lawsuits, like you said. And in those situations, depending on how bad the situation was, can you possibly face charges for reckless, having caused someone's death?
Absolutely. You know, these the penalties are very strong in New York. In Connecticut and New Jersey, less so, but there are 16 states around the country where you can do jail time.
Yeah, so
and in some cases it can be a felony. Yeah.
All right, so now you have the Labor Day holiday coming up. I know your numbers haven't come out yet, but every holiday we keep seems like we're setting a new peak, no? Or is it looking that way for Labor Day?
Yeah, gasoline is staying cheap. You know, people are driving. Like I said, we drove 3 trillion miles last year. That's 330 round trips between planet Earth and Pluto.
Pluto.
The weather can be a little cool there, so dress warmly.
And that's not even a planet anymore, Pluto.
Yeah, well, yeah, imagine.
Right.
Yeah, well, I've never been, so I can't say.
That's a topic for
But,
another time.
you know, there's lots of crude oil, lots of gasoline around. We've got 9 billion gallons of gasoline in storage. All refineries could shut down. We still have nearly a month's worth of gasoline.
So let's get it back to a quarter like it used to be.
Why not?
Robert Sinclair with AAA Northeast. Thanks for coming in and warning us about this hazard that we really could avoid just by being careful.
You're
Hopefully
welcome.
drivers will pay heed.
Hopefully. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming in.
You're welcome.
And we'll be right back.